Welcome everybody to the informational meeting of your Sioux Falls City Council. Today is the 20th of December, and before anybody else gets to wish you a happy holidays and especially a Merry Christmas, I will do it. So happy holidays and Merry Christmas, everyone. We have a fairly full agenda today, so I would entertain a committee report from Public Service. Public Service.
Sorry. Thank you. I was
Thank you,
busy
Counselor.
passing down the card.
Yeah.
Pat was distracting me like usual. Public Services, just kidding. Sorry, Counselor. Public Services met last week, and we discussed, just really had basically a TIF 101 presentation from Community Development, highlighted the TIFs that we have done in Sioux Falls. One has received an amendment and is just based on a few changes. And then there have been some that are matured or paid off, if you will. All the information is online as well as the presentation from last week. But again, it was really just a 101. What have we used them for? Can we use it for residential? Can we use it for economic development, et cetera? So it was a good conversation. We do it once a year, and that's what we did.
Super. Thank you. Any questions of Councilor Erickson? Okay, moving on. Council open discussion. Seeing none, we'll move on to presentation. Director Turbach, you ready to go with our financials? I know you are.
I am ready, Councilor Rolfing. Tracy Turbach with the Finance Office. Councilors, this will be the last time you see me this year with a monthly update. Kind of hard to believe. It seems like only yesterday we started this year, but with that I'll jump into our economic indicator review, and then in short time we'll get to your questions. So unemployment in Sioux Falls MSA ticked down slightly, about 0.1% in October. Those are the latest figures we have, down to 1.9%. That compares with a statewide rate of 2.4 and a national rate of 4.7%. So employment still going strong here with a very, very low unemployment rate in the community. Building permits, we're 1 year away from the end, or 1 month away from the end of the year. At this point, through November, we have exceeded the 2014 calendar year total for the value of permits issued, and we're running just ever so slightly ahead of last year. About $5 million ahead of last year's permits as of November 30th. That's $653.5 million year to date in construction that's been permitted. So again, another very strong year. I guess we'll wait and see in a couple of weeks or so just whether or not we surpass last year's total or not. But even if we don't, it's clearly been a very, very strong year for construction activity again. Looking at sales tax revenues, this is a graphic of our first penny sales tax revenue growth on a rolling 12-month basis. As you can see, through November, during the preceding 12 months, we had grown at 3.3% over the year prior to that. That is, as we've been talking for many months now, a growth rate that is below what our expectations were when the 16 budget was adopted. So we do not expect to as you've heard many times over the last 6 months or so, we do not expect to hit our revenue target for 2016. But you can see certainly there's some good news, I suppose, if you want to look for that in here, that it has stopped declining over the last 5 months. We've seen the growth rate plateau at between 3 and 3.5%. Whether it will start to move up next or down further, I guess only time will tell, and we'll, as always, continue to track that very, very closely. The other indicator that we look at relative to sales tax is our entertainment tax growth. You can see we're growing it over the last year at 3.7%. Again, not as robust as we have seen in the past, recent past anyway, but still a pretty solid growth rate. Nonetheless, again, we see that continue to decline, 3.7% over the last 12 months. Certainly not what we'd like to see. This is, as we've talked about before, oftentimes we see this as an indicator of discretionary spending that's available Certainly not the spending at that on those types of sales growing at the rate we had seen over the last couple of years. Last slide, we'll look at the general fund revenues and expenses year to date. So through 11 out of the 12 months of the year, revenue so far $131.4 million in our general fund. That compares with $126.8 million last year. So this year, that $131 million in revenue represents 86% of what we had budgeted for revenues, slightly behind on a percentage basis from last year, which should be no surprise to anyone given the lower than expected growth in sales taxes. On the expenditure side, this year to date, $128.4 million in general fund expenditures. That's 81% of the budget. And that total is up $1 million from last year. Through November, we had spent $127.4 million, or 84% of the budget. So you can see where our revenues are below where we were last year on a percentage basis, and our expenditures are also below where we were last year on a percentage of budget basis. So we've modified our spending for the last 7, 8, 9 months or so to adapt and respond to the lower than expected growth in our sales tax revenues. So with that, I would open it up to any questions you folks have on your minds today.
Questions? Councilor Starr.
Director Turbeck, I get questions from citizens all the time that ask, where are we going to be at the end of the year? And that's always that general question that the public often asks, but as you have your thumb on the pulse of where we're going to end the year, what would you tell that average citizen who's saying, where's the city budget going to end up at the end of 16?
Well, I suppose where will we end up in what regard? I mean, we started the year with a budget that would have had our reserves projected to end the year at a little over 25% of what our budget is. And as I stand here today, that's still our expectation, that our reserves will end the year slightly above that 25% policy target. So from that standpoint, we expect to end the year exactly where we had planned when the budget was first presented. In regard to the sales tax revenue growth, we certainly don't expect to end the year where we had anticipated, just as we've been saying. That will be, by all indications, somewhere in that 3 to 3.5% range. So that's my best guess today. I don't have a crystal ball as to what will happen with our December numbers. That information is locked in at this point. I mean, it's the Christmas sales that are taking place today, for example, those are actually become revenues to the city in 2017. So whatever we get yet through the end of the year will actually be as a result of sales that occurred in the calendar month of November. So as I say, the die is cast for us. We don't know what those numbers are yet. We will fairly early in January, we'll know from the Department of Revenue what our final collections are for this year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Questions, anyone? Councilor Staley?
I was just having a conversation with our budget analyst, Dave Bixler. We were talking about something I hadn't even considered, but actually we're probably faring better right now than we would have been had we not had that extra half a penny sales tax increase. Or is that, I would think that's playing into supporting any sales tax growth we have, because we're getting extra revenue from that. Do you know, like, how much?
Are you referring to the half penny increase of the state sales tax?
Yes.
No, all of that additional revenue that's generated from that goes to the state. The city doesn't see anything.
That's not affecting us at all?
That's correct. It's
okay,
not.
So the state actually is in better shape than it would have been statewide?
Well, I can't speak to the state. I know that they are not collecting the amount of revenue that they had anticipated from their sales tax levy.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a couple of comments in. On the MSA, I don't know whether you can answer this or not, Tracy, but we keep hearing about the demographics of unemployment, that, we're down to 4.7 on a federal and 2.2 2 or 3 state, and we're down at 1.9, but that there are a lot of people who have given up or are severely underemployed in that. Is that true in Sioux Falls?
Yeah, you're right. That's a question I cannot answer.
Oh,
I don't-
come on.
I don't know what the demographics are here. I think you're right to an extent on the national level. The number of folks that have quit looking for work is significant, but I also know that based on what I read, that a lot of that has to do with people simply retiring. So I think we're seeing a lot more people that maybe hadn't planned to retire for a variety of reasons are choosing to do that. And so the overall workforce is shrinking, maybe not overall, but certainly not growing to the extent that it would but for that.
A lot of us baby boomers out there doing that. Yep. Well, it was just a question that I thought
I
I
think
would
that'll
ask.
continue to be a demographic challenge for the country, going forward. That's my perspective on it.
I want to say right up front, congratulations. You called it early in the year. You made some adjustments. The administration made some adjustments, not dramatic, but just enough to keep us where we are. Our expenditures are less than our income, and we did it just like a good family budget would have. I lived on commissions for a long time, and that's kind of the way you are. You don't know exactly what's coming in every month, and so it's hard to budget. And when you see something changing, you got to make some changes so that you don't have to always dip into reserve. So thank you very much for keeping your finger on it and keeping us where we are financially.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the comments, Councilor.
Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Okay. That'll bring us to our executive session. Would someone like to make a motion, please?
Move into executive session to do 2 different items: consulting with legal counsel or reviewing communication from legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters according to SDCL 1-25-2, subsection 3. And we will also be discussing the qualifications, competence, performance, character, or fitness of any public officer or employee or prospective officer or employee. The term employee does not include any independent contractor. This is according to SDCL 1-25-2, subsection 1.
Could I have a second? Second, Erickson. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Erickson,
Yes.
Erpenbach,
Yes.
Kiley,
Yes.
Neitzert,
Yes.
Rolfing,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0. I would ask everyone to clear the chambers so we can be into executive session. Thank you.